Welcome to the OCOM podcast, Modern Medical Education, where we gather experts about different aspects of medical education to advance all of our learning. And today it's a really special episode because we're going to talk about Apple technologies in medical education, something that we're pioneering here at OCOM. And to start off the podcast, I'll introduce Shazam Mohammed, our Director of Information Technology, and his name really is Shazam. You know, I've seen his driver's license. In fact, if you just whisper the name Shazam, he appears. Welcome, Shazam.
Thank you so much. My name is Shazam Mohammed, like Dr. Hasty said, it's a pleasure to be here and to be able to talk about the different ways we're utilizing Apple products here on campus. And I've also asked instructional technologist Hao Do to join us. Hao does have unique experience working with Apple, and he's very knowledgeable about the Apple products and how.
Thank you, Shazam and Dean Hasty. So, anytime someone asks a question, I just appear. So my name's Hao, and I'm happy to be here. I noticed when I started here, we definitely use a lot of Apple products, and there's a lot of innovative things going on right now.
Yeah. And of course, the perfect name for a medical school, Hao Do, D-O is the last name. So for years, people said, hello, Mr. Do, because, I'd have it on my credit card or something. So, right. But now you're like the real Mr. Do. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I joke around too that I was mishired because they thought that I had a D-O when it was actually my last name.
You're almost destined to work here.
There we go. Full circle, though.
Excellent. Good. Well, anyway, one of the things that, we'll spend some time talking about today is, how OCOM uses Apple. And, of course, Apple has been, a leader in education really since the beginning. I think that was part of the, the vision of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak back in the 1970s when they founded Apple. And, I'm blessed to be an Apple Distinguished Educator myself. In fact, as far as I know, I think the only medical school dean that is a Apple Distinguished Educator. And, it's something I believe in, just because I know what a difference that the Apple technology can make in a medical education background. So,
and even informally, we talk all the time. You're always down in our office, and even when we're up there with you, we talk about all the cool stuff that Apple is doing. We all just got the new phones. Me and Hao have the iPhone Air, which I absolutely love. You have the iPhone Pro. I know you get one every year, but it just goes to show how much you're involved with the technology that we utilize and how kind of up to date you are and how up to date we all are. OCOM is. By design is an Apple first campus, right? It's designed with intention to ensure that everybody here, students, faculty, staff, we have a secure, innovative technology. Everybody has that added touch, that experience when they not only come into the room, but when they utilize all the products, whether they're learning or teaching. Our guiding philosophy sort of is designed to reduce friction, improve outcomes, and sort of just overall inspire everybody, right? And I think even I just did some student interviews today, and when the questions come up about technology and how we're utilizing it, they're all blown away by how we're utilizing Apple here on campus. It's really the next-gen stuff, the technology people love to utilize, and I think that is actually a sellable point for us. Like when students especially realize that we're an all Apple campus, that's a selling point for us, right? They want to be able to utilize this technology. They know that Apple is on the forefront of technology, especially in this environment. So the partnership with them has been truly fantastic, and they are always working with us. Like me and Hao and I, Edwin and the whole team, we went out to Cupertino a few months back, and they were just so gracious, and they were genuinely excited to hear what we're doing and want to help us push forward, like wanting to help us go to the next step, which is why I'm so thrilled to have them as a partner.
Yeah, well said. And I like how you said about focusing on technology. I mean, I don't think you can create a modern medical school without thinking about and being intentional with your technology. I mean, if you think about it, after FTEs, after your faculty and staff, employment costs, really the next largest expense is information technology, right? I mean, and depending on the building and what you're, if you already have the building, it's definitely technology. And of course, I think it is something that you have to be, thoughtful for. And I will tell you, I agree with you. I think it's definitely something that when the prospective medical students come in and they see the Apple hardware, they see our technology, I think they say, well, this is a little different than some government-sponsored educational institution where they, use the generic, hardware and software. And I think that does, at least initially communicate that we are forward-thinking and thinking about technology as part of everything we do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think for a lot of schools and medical colleges, it's probably thinking of IT as like infrastructure, but I think with a lot of Apple products, it goes a little bit further, and it's more about the innovation. And if you can take risks and see the benefits, and I don't see why you wouldn't when you look at all the cost benefits from security and management, from expenses, life cycle of the products, the resale value of the products, even after 5-6 years. I've worked in other universities where we're in a mixed environment between some PC devices and Apple devices, and then I've seen universities that are only on a PC device, and I've been worked fortunately in other places where they're all Mac, and I can see how the differences are from speaking from an IT standpoint. You actually get reduced number of tickets. So anywhere to like 30%, you get just that reduction because of it being an Apple device and the security that comes with it. But on top of that, I think also some folks would say that if it's they don't go down the Apple path or Mac path because they believe that the expense is too high. But if they look at the long term, like 4 or 5 years, when you're working with a mixed environment, some of those expenses for the repairs and those other devices end up costing you more. So by going with an Apple device, you do end up reducing your costs, not increasing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the IBM study, over $500 per year per FTE savings when you incorporate both hardware, software, and personnel costs, right? I think it's like $542. It was tens of thousands of employees, and and they did that. And then of course, Emory University with their recent hospitals that they were on an Epic platform for electronic health records, they saved $300 per year per provider.
Yeah.
And you look at some of these healthcare systems that have tens of thousands of employees, it would save millions of dollars. But I mean, I get it, right? Sometimes when you're a government, you have to go for the lowest bidder and the cheapest hardware, so you end up getting this government grade hardware. But it's sort of like penny wise and pound foolish, because you don't look at the whole thing. You don't look at the productivity gains. You don't look at the overall cost holistically in terms of both hardware, software, and but I guess that's one of the advantages of being a private institution. We can look holistically at this.
Yeah, there's definitely unquantified benefits too, because some of it is things like value added, or things that you see actually after a period of time, not at the start. There's also surveys about how users actually want more Apple products. It's just some institutions just don't ask.
Right. Yeah. And again, the sort of intangible aspects of it, like you mentioned it in regards to cost, but for me as a leader in the department, what's the most important thing to us is time, right? So when we have significantly less issues, and the issues that do come in are relatively quicker to resolve, the amount of time that we're able to save and put towards other things, more forward-thinking initiatives is, there's, again, an intangible value to that. And in that environment, I've also worked in places where it's been mixed, PC only. And again, coming into this organization brand new, we didn't have a opportunity to break down, assess our needs, and partner again with Apple to address those. And looking back, I wouldn't have changed a single thing. We're able to, again, resolve issues very quickly, and any hardware issues that do come up, even if we have to send a device out, they're back within 48 hours.
Yeah. I would also make the argument, you said, when you have tickets and, House said 30% reduction in, the tickets for, Apple environment. I think our tickets, what you guys are seeing, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are focused on like AI things or how to use technology in new and creative ways, which, at the other places, sometimes, you're focusing on trying to fix some hardware problem or some software glitch or, security issue or hack and stuff like that. We spend our time, I think, focusing on things to help users be more productive and do greater things, right? At least I think that's the value.
Exactly. And again, we're proud of our ability to support technology here, and we're proud of our level of responsiveness. But again, like you mentioned, it does open up the opportunity for us to take that time that we would otherwise spend fixing problems towards looking towards the future instead.
Yeah, yeah. I was at another university recently, and they you could tell they spent a lot of money on technology, but it's like they had one of these hologram things, which it's fancy and stuff, but you ask them, oh no, it doesn't really work, and they had one of these immersive rooms, and then that doesn't really work either.
Right.
When you come to our environment, it just works, right? It's like being able to go in and I was a visiting professor last fall at this other medical school, and I mean we couldn't even figure out how to get wireless casting to work. Here we have AirPlay everywhere, so you can just go in and present from your phone, and there's no call to IT. Things are just instantaneously work, and that, to me, I mean, I think that's always been sort of our vision of IT, right? We want to have it in the background that supports us, yet doesn't get in our way.
Right. And so just for anybody that might be listening to this that really don't know how OCOM is utilizing the Apple products in a school, so every student here gets the latest MacBook Air, they get the Magic Case, and they get the Apple Pencil. And they have it fully warranted through their entire OCOM experience. On top of that, employees all get MacBook Airs, and even some get MacBook Pro, like Edwin. He's our media engineer. He needs that extra capability to edit and manage large files. So some employees will get MacBook Pros too. So we utilize Apple products across campus. It's very important to how we interact with each other every day. It supports our teaching, it supports our learning. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the iPads. We have what's called in the business they call it the one-to-one solution, right? One device per one student, and I'm convinced with the iPad, especially how we use it. Things like the Complete Anatomy by Elsevier that the students are using, they can literally put a cadaver anywhere. That software is amazing, right? The augmented reality parts of it, but even just being able to go down into the place in a live time. I've actually even used that bedside with patients and, to show them the anatomy, describing, some procedure they're having or whatever. And to be able to learn, using this technology is great. And also, I think in terms of mind mapping, I just had a great conversation today with Colleen, one of our learning specialists here, about mind mapping using the iPad. With the digital note taking, you can do it. And I told her the story when I was at Apple a number of years ago. They had an expert that came in from UCLA that had done a study with incoming medical students, and they found that 0% of medical students had any training in digital note taking when they first came to medical school. And of course they gave training there, but if you think about it, historically, and how most places do one-on-one programs, they do it with a keyboard, and it's a very linear note taking. And all the experts say that, when you're taking notes and everything, you do need that sort of that haptic, component, and you can sometimes draw out things or draw arrows and insert things while you're taking notes, which you just can't do with a keyboard interface. And I think that's one of the reasons probably why our medical students, when you surveyed them, the vast majority said that they would recommend iPads for the future classes, right?
Yeah, and you know what? That's another reason why we actually brought Hal in. Hal is our instructional technologist here, and we kind of assessed the department and what people were asking for and the need for technology from students and employees. and an instructional technologist fit the mold so perfectly. And Hal has been such an excellent addition to this department, just by creating these workshops and tutorials on how everybody, students and employees, can best utilize the tools that are already available to them. And I don't know if you want to explain.
I would add to and I've worked in Microsoft Office and Microsoft OS and in Linux, but my preferred is definitely Mac OS. But the iPad OS, I think, back to what Dean Hasty was saying, is I think the reason students really enjoy using it is because it does help with learning comprehension when you physically write a note. There's studies that show that does help a person understand it. Now, on the same study, though, it also talks about how people that take good notes is where it's actually effective. So if you're just that person that just types and tries to archive and document everything, it doesn't really sink in. But when you're writing it down, it's letting you kind of sink in, comprehend what you're actually writing. Then I can see how it benefits. But there's other use cases that I think the killer app that's on the iPad that's different from the Mac OS, though, is actually that Apple Pencil, right? Because I can write naturally. It's natural to me. I can just scribble out text and it'll delete it, rather than looking for a delete button or looking for a keyboard. So it's more intuitive, and I think that tight integration on Apple devices between the software and the hardware is what that symbiotic relationship is what allows me as a learner using that device, more features and things that are used to me, that I'm used to, that works for me. So I can imagine other students feel that way too when they're using their devices their way.
Right. And I also think that, especially in the world of ambient AI where, you can have, apps and everything take the notes for you. What's important is, I think, as the individual learner, is your personal interpretation of your learning, right? Someone can write down exactly what the professor's saying, but how you're internalizing that information and taking those personal notes can really change your learning, I think. And I think that's one of the values of it. And by the way, you talked about, training the folks. For those that don't know, we actually have I call it a genius bar. I forget what you guys always call it, something else it seems like. But
changes daily.
But we have this beautiful space, and we actually did this on purpose, right? The architect, we said we wanted to make it central to what we do. We wanted this to be a sort of a third space for technology. So when students, faculty, staff, had things, challenges that they needed, solutions for from an IT standpoint, they could come by and talk to our experts and, either, get that solution for AI or get that solution for their hardware or their software and, come up with things. And of course, there's this, it's all glass and it's overlooking our, atrium area and stuff like that. And there's, learning spaces and all this other stuff within there, and to see how in there, teaching somebody how to use technology in a better way, it really just makes me happy.
I love the open space, though. It feels welcoming, because I think in most other IT places I've worked at, we're thrown in some basement and it's the dreaded place to go, because any customer user that has to come to IT is usually bad news, right? But everyone else that comes in,
scary hallway from The Shining.
Yeah,
right.
But here
Red
it's we're open door policy. We're and even if you don't even have a tech issue, just come and chat or tech talk. It's fine too.
That's what I love about our space, just because, and it happens often. So people come in just to talk with us a bit, whether it's about technology or other things, and I think the best ideas come from these quick conversations that come up. Maybe they have a little issue and that they've just been dealing with. I'm like, oh no, actually we have a solution to that. You shouldn't be dealing with that. We can fix that. And I think the tech space really encourages that. Because if you're coming down the stairs or walking down the hallway, you see it. If you see us in, we're always welcoming people in if we're out in the open space. And again, we love talking with everybody. We love having our ear to the ground and be aware of everything that's going on. And on top of that, just aware of how people are utilizing technology. We want to be aware. Some people figure things out that we might not have come across. We want to archive that. If somebody else has a similar use case, we want to be able to tell them how to do it, right?
And I also think that's part of the reason why you guys have a 98% success rate, right? But and I think I think it's mostly because they love you guys, right? But I also think it's everything together, right? Sometimes there's this halo effect, both good and bad. But they love the technology, which I think, our combination of the Apple technology, the Google Workspace, which again, that's best in class in terms of collaboration and security and privacy and collaboration. It's sort of like the killer combo. But they also have this, like you said, this non-intimidating space that doesn't look like, Red Rum from The Shining or whatever, right?
Right.
Where they can actually go, because, technology can be super intimidating. And they go with you guys and you're making like some Grogu on your 3D printer or whatever, right? And just
He was 3D printed. Who was 3D printed? Iron Man was 3D printed.
but that's fun, right? And I think they can see that technology, it can be fun, it can be inspirational, and it's like that. It's this inspirational feeling when they come to that space, and they get inspired about different ways they can use technology, which I think is exactly what we want.
When I was a student, I didn't have a lot of these things, but it wasn't until the very end of my senior year in college that I was allowed to bring. I had an iBook at the time, so it was one of the early iBooks. But I love the fact that while everyone else was on a PC where they had like a network identification card connected, mine was built in, like Wi-Fi was built in. So like innovation, it's weird how a lot of people think that innovation is when you add things to a product, but if you look at a lot of the Apple products, they were the first to kind of move away from, like, say, floppy disks, for example, right? But at the same time, they were the first to remove floppy disk and go with zip drives. And then from zip drives, Apple was one of the first to remove their own zip drives. They were willing to kind of change, and that continuous improvement kind of runs through. Like, you can see how they added optical drives, but then now they don't even have optical drives at all because they knew the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, so I'll be honest, I love Apple. Like, I had iPhones for as long as I can remember. But the past few years, it did seem like I was just going through the motions and getting the new phone every year, not being excited about the features. But I'm very happy that Apple is still leaning into not only innovating, but creating a beautiful form factor, right? Yeah. So I had this conversation a few times, and you and I have the iPhone Airs. It really did re-inspire me on Apple. Like, people probably see the iPhone Air and maybe they've not touched it yet, but it's a beautiful device, and I think it just sends the message to the consumer that we want to give you everything that you need to use day to day, but we want to make it beautiful and functional as well. And that's one thing I really appreciate at Apple. And this phone actually just reminded me of that, right? Because I think they might have stepped away from that for a little bit, but I think they're leaning towards this again, form and function.
Right. Yeah, and I also love how they pay attention to every single detail and always continuously improving. Which is one of our core values here at OCOM: continuous improvement and innovation. And I'm a big believer that excellence is not a state of being; it's a state of becoming. So even if you were doing something excellent 5 or 10 years ago, it may not be excellent anymore. In biology, they say that if you're not growing, you're dying, right? And I think that's true of them, and it's also and of course Apple I think is always rated as one of the probably the most innovative and continuous improvement companies, but always focusing on the details. And I think that's true of our aspiration here at OCOM. We always want to continuously improve, get better. What we're doing today hopefully is better than what we were doing yesterday, and hopefully what we're doing tomorrow is even better than today. And of course that's exciting, right? I mean, who wants to be in a place where they're doing the same thing they were 10 or 20 years ago?
Right. Yeah. I mean, on that note, how do you think the future of Apple and OCOM looks?
Oh, I'm so excited. I think, I'd say even over the last couple of years, we're the only medical school that I know that on day one when we launched OCOM, every single student had AI. Every single student had a, one of the first to ever have a, one-on-one in a completely 100% Apple environment, from day one. And I think, look at what that's done for us. I mean, the things that we're doing, just like the fact that we, started a podcast the first year, the fact that, we had, all this collaborative learning, the fact that, all of our students are using AR and, all these different things and, simulation first environment and all this other stuff. I think, I think it speaks a lot of volumes for, our belief that we have to continuously improve. And patients want that too, right? They want a physician who is always trained better, always getting new information, always providing better care to the patients. And I think that's what residency programs want from our graduates. They want that, they want the physician coming out of medical school to be better than the one that was coming out of medical school 5 or 10 years ago. And I think with our evidence-based approach, collaboration, technology-centric environment, that, and of course, person-centric environment, most importantly, truly creates a more caring, competent physician.
Yeah, and I think with the training that we'll be able to provide students now, but in the future, they're going to be fully prepared for the digital landscape once they graduate. Once they finish at OCOM, I'd like to think they'll be the most equipped in regards to technology, maybe AI at that time. By the time they're out of here, and they're going to get be on the top of the list to get the best jobs possible.
Absolutely. And I know that you're working on a AI certificate and all these other things that we're planning for the future. I mean, how cool is that? And of course, I think the physician of the future, they're going to have tools that we've never had before in medicine, right? Just to be able to walk in a room where you have this ambient AI environment that can help you take notes. But, how we train that physician, how to leverage that technology to better care for patients and to, get to those, more difficult diagnoses and to have that more empathetic approach to patient while we, have that, patient and, patient first approach, but also to use the skills, the resources, the technology that we have. I'm just so excited what we're doing.
Yeah, and I know we all have ideas, and I think most of them are we are able to implement. I'm just so excited to fast forward 3-4 years and just see how we're actually utilizing this. All the Apple products, especially at OCOM. I mean, I have some ideas about the Apple Vision Pro, iPads, just all the new stuff that they're coming out with and how we can integrate it and utilize it. It's just going to make learning fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think each of those products too have benefits. I underestimated the Apple Watch, right? I kind of took the Apple Watch as I just need to check the time in the calendar, email. But it turns out a lot of the health data that I get from it has helped me, whether it's the noise environment warnings and heart rate, all these other things that the Apple Watch does. And I think if you're a physician, you've got your patient that has an Apple Watch or an iPhone, I could see how they could utilize a lot of that data to help them get to some of their decisions quicker. But I think as for the physicians, as a student, I can't imagine having these options when I was a student. But then also even after you've left the university, school, and you're still using it, but in the workforce. So now they're ready, right? So they're workforce ready. But I think the part that I can see that there's definitely room for improvement is definitely with AI. So with Apple Intelligence, I can see how there's going to be new benefits, but there's new challenges too. And I think a lot of the apps need to get there, third-party apps. But I also thought about it too with that type of innovation with the Vision Pro is, yeah, right now a lot of enterprises and it might seem like it's expensive for some people, but I do see how in some training and support or remote teaching and things like that, I could see how the Vision Pro will work. But when you add AI with it, I think the difference that a lot of people don't recognize with Apple Intelligence is that it's on-device processing, right? So like on my Mac, my MacBook Air or my MacBook Pro, if I need to run Apple Intelligence, I can control click on it, get writing tools. I can always get access to that. And that access is important because when you're working with Gemini, Claude, or ChatGPT, you need an internet connection. So the difference with Apple is that it's on-device processing because it's all downloaded on your device, processes it. The more advanced things it might send to a private cloud compute, or you might have the integration between ChatGPT. But I think that's just going to keep moving forward. And if you have in your pocket a sidekick, and I'm able to resolve and figure out things that I'm not a domain expert in, that for me is increasing my productivity for things that I know nothing about, Or I could just get feedback on something where I've done a lot of times where I've written something for a workshop and then I push it to an AI, and I'm getting critical feedback from the AI, and then I act on that. I don't always take the recommendation, but a lot of times it's really on point. And then every now and then you get this like diamond in the rough, and then I'm shocked at that it figured something out that I really needed help with. But I can see with Apple that AI would be a future, and I'm sure our students really want to learn more about AI because they are using Notebook LLM and Apple Intelligence and ChatGPT. So I think part of the innovation is that Apple is looking at those things as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Apple Intelligence is currently available to every student, every employee has access to it. And I think, as future iterations come up, it's just going to get better and better.
Yeah. And also the peripherals too, the accessories. So, and you all would have been just fascinated with this conversation about a week or so ago. We're looking at this new ultrasound probe by Vave. VAVE is the name of the company, but it just wirelessly, sends the information over to the phone or the iPad, and it's a transducer.
Oh, no physical connection?
Yeah, no physical connection. Just sits in your pocket. 1 to 2 hours of scanning time, and then of course you can always charge it and stuff like that. And and then the great thing is it goes back to your phone, your iPad, and of course how things are moving. They're working with AI and stuff like that, and so pretty soon you'll be able to scan somebody. You'll just, instead of listening to the heart, you'll just be able to go up to somebody like auscultate a heart and do a little mini echocardiogram on them, and it would actually give you the diagnosis. The AI would probably give you a prompted diagnosis, or that kid that comes in the emergency department with right lower quadrant pain, to scan it, and it'll say likelihood of appendicitis 98%, or those type of things, right? It's fascinating. In fact, we're training first year medical students on ultrasound, but again, leveraging that technology with Apple, I'm just so excited where things are moving. So
it's an interesting extension to digital transformation, because I've been looking at how, if you look at the legacy ideas where people are still doing print, for example, right? Paper, print, filing in a cabinet, trying to find things. When you have something that's digital, you can query it faster. You can use AI and leverage the power to get more data-informed decisions made. And I think having tools like that you're talking about, I can only imagine how that can help a doctor in the future.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I am so excited with the future, and I'm so excited with the present with you all. It's so incredible to work with you all. But I just wanted to wrap up with any last thoughts, anything that you'd like to say before we close the show.
No, I just think the potential for even research, how I was mentioning about the Apple Watch, just the data that we can collect from that and all the different applications in regards to research, and for us and our students here. And again, the Apple Vision Pro, I'm so excited about. I can't wait for the future editions to come out. And I really think in this space, in medical education, we'll be able to really utilize it. Hopefully get into the hands of most, if not all, students. Maybe down the road sometime. But yeah. Final thoughts.
My final thought is basically I'm just happy that it works, because it's one less distraction, right? So that's enough.
It just works.
Works, yeah.
Well, with that, we'll end the show today. Thank you again for joining us for another OCOM podcast, Modern Medical Education. Please join us next time when we discuss the current and the future of medical education in America.